Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this beautiful picture frame. I just made it the other day and it is a great project even for beginner carpenters or woodworkers. It's just a lot of fun and the result is beautiful, I'd have to say. I made this specifically because I had this picture in mind, but this is a beautiful picture frame for any picture you might have. It'll just make the picture look even better, which is exactly why I made it myself. So I'm going to show you how to make it and how I did it specifically. And you don't have to follow along every step, but this is a great way to at least make something that looks really close to this. And it's super pretty. So let's get started. So really, in thinking of this design, I wanted something really simplistic, but that would go well with a lot of different photos because I didn't want to have to be set to one certain photo for this picture frame. So I'm going simplistic, just wood surrounded by some white around a picture. The picture is a 4x6 size picture, and then there's some white bordering just to add that simplistic look that I really wanted. First things first, you're gonna wanna probably pick out your wood. I picked out some wood that I had just laying around, just some small kind of scrap pieces that I could chop up into nice rectangular pieces, and I think it looks very nice. It had kind of a reddish hint to it, so that's one reason why I picked it out. I made sure it was the right size for my frame. And that brings me to the second point, which is what ratio do you want it and what size do you want it? So the ratio I did mine is 4x6, which is quite a bit bigger than 4x6. It's probably around 12 by 8 inches size wise. That's just the size I did mine because that's the size of picture I wanted in it. You can do your size, whatever you want, whatever ratio you want, that's not a big deal. Just decide that now so that you can pick out the right size wood and the right color wood for that. So of course, after you've got your wood, you're gonna wanna cut it out. I cut my wood at a width of about 2 inches, maybe not quite 2 inches. I use centimeters here because I live in China, but around 2 inches, and that seemed to be about the right size for me. It just looks good and it looks simplistic yet and it's not overdone. I know some picture frames have a really thin border to it, but I like a little bit more just to be able to see the grain of the wood and the texture of the wood. That really adds to the picture frame. Now I used a jigsaw for my first few cuts because my wood was not square, it was just from the wood pile, like I said, the scrap pile. So I had to use a jigsaw to get at least one straight line. After I got one straight cut, or I think I did two maybe, I used a table sander, a band sander to get those edges really flat so then next I can put it in a miter saw and chop off the ends at a perfect 90-degree corner. Now my wood was very rough, so I made sure to sand it down on that band sander. It worked out very nice. I'm really happy with the color of the wood. I wasn't sure exactly what color it would be because on the other side it was more of a grayish brown wood, not so much red, but it looks really nice and I'm super happy about that. Let's go to the next step. So after I cut the ends down with a miter saw, I went over to the table saw and cut it almost through the center just because I wanted the pieces to be the exact same width for all of them. So I just set my fence at about 2 inches wide and ran all the wood through there for the tops and for the sides. I also decided to mesh the top and bottom like this instead of having a 45-degree cut because I know how much of trouble 45-degree cuts can give you, and so I decided to do it that way just for that ease. So after I had all 4 of my pieces cut in semi-smooth, sanded down flat, so I went and built kind of a homemade jib me and my dad did. We put a router upside down in a table with a little hole through it so that we could router out the notch for where the glass in the picture sets, just so it's in the picture frame a little bit. It worked out good, but there would probably be easier ways. For one, if you had a table router, that would work great. You could also use a table saw, especially if you had 45 cuts at the corners, but we decided to use a router since we did not want people to see the notch from the end. So we did that, and that worked out very nice as just kind of a homemade jib. Now the next step is super important, and it's super important to get it precise because it is putting the doweling in the 2 pieces. I did 2 doweling for each connection just to make sure it won't twist or anything. My dad kind of said I needed to do 2, otherwise like 1 would have been really easy or just gluing it, but that probably would not be strong enough and I don't know that I would want that. Anyways, this way I know it's super strong and it's not going to be falling apart on me anytime soon. So when you're drilling these, be very precise. I got my dad's help on it because I knew that it would be hard, and it is one of the toughest parts, he said, of woodworking when you're trying to put the doweling into the wood and get it lined up correctly. So I had his help. It's always a good idea to get someone else's help if it's a technical or really tough part of it. And this was one of the toughest parts, probably, just lining it up and getting it correct. We used a drill press a little bit, so we put a fence there, and then we could get the edge pieces drilled exactly the same on all edge pieces, but then for the others you kind of just have to hand it. So we lined it up, marked little pieces of pencil, you know, just exactly where you needed to drill, and then drilled it as straight as we could. And it actually turned out surprisingly well. The next step, of course, is gluing it all together, and this step is one that afterwards you will have to wait because we want the glue to dry very solid before we start sanding it again. I waited overnight just to be sure. My dad said even longer can be very good sometimes as well. But yeah, just dip a little glue in where the doweling is supposed to go. Of course, toilet cleaner container is the best for this because I mean, it works great, and we live in China, so, you know, you can't get great glue containers. Anyways, it worked out good, and I set it to dry overnight. The next day, after a good long dry, I took that band sander and sanded it down really, really flat, just so, because it was not perfect. There were a few imperfections around the joints. They were not perfect, so we sanded that down. I made sure it was flush, it was smooth on all those connections. And then I took a little hand sander. What are those called? That type of sander, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you're seeing it right now. Anyways, I took one of those and sanded it down really smooth with some fine 120 grit sandpaper. I could have even gone more fine, but I didn't have any at the time, so that was good enough. I made sure to get everything smooth. I sanded the corners a little bit just to be sure that there weren't any sharp edges, as I want it to look very classy and yet have this smooth look, not too sharp, jagged edges that could be dangerous. So I did that, and after that, the next step is to varnish it. I used just spray lacquer on it, and it darkened it just a touch to where it is a great shade of red. I'm really happy with how it looks, and I think it looks really, really classy. Don't you? I mean, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think, if it looks good or if I should have done something differently. I always like hearing your guys' feedback. The next step was to get glass. I just went into town to a local glass shop and had him cut a piece the right size. I took the picture frame with me so that it would for sure fit, and that was like less than $1 US, you know, it's super cheap here, at least in China. Now in the States it might be a little tougher, or you could even go glassless if you didn't want any glass, but I think that adds a classiness to it. Now pretty much the last step I haven't mentioned so far at least, is cutting a little thin piece of wood for the back panel to hold the glass and the picture in place. I cut that out of just some really, really thin, maybe 1/16 of an inch thickness of wood, and then to hold that in place I took 4 washers and kind of smoothed off one edge with a hand grinder we had, with an angle grinder, and then put a screw into the wood, so that if you need to take out the picture, you just unscrew those a little bit, twist the washers around, take out the wood, change the picture, put it back in, screw it back together, and it looks great. And it's thin too. It's minimalistic. You don't want too much sticking out on the back so that it's really far away from the wall when it's hanging. So that's what I wanted to be careful of. And after varnishing it a few more times, I think it looks beautiful. I love the texture of the wood, the different curves, the different colors of the redwood, and I am super happy with the finished product. If you made it, let me know, because I love to hear about it, and I love to hear of any suggestions you have that could make it better or anything else. Let me know what else you want to see me build if you have anything specific, and I guess I will see you next time. Bye!